Good evening. My name is Andrew Heil, Associate Pastor of Home Moravian Church and a glad parent of the Salem Montessori School community. It is my honor and joy to welcome you here this evening. Home Moravian Church and Salem Montessori School share an important partnership that makes gatherings like this one possible, opportunities for us to come together, to listen, wonder, and to discover ways that we can deepen our shared commitments to nurturing the lives of children and their families. Thank you for being here tonight as we continue this journey together. At this time, I'd like to welcome Patrick Velde, head of Salem Montessori School.
All right, thank you, Andrew, and welcome to you all. It is my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce Lucretia Carter-Berry, a trailblazer in the field of anti-racism education. Dr. Berry is the founder of Brownicity, an agency dedicated to promoting anti-racism education that is scholarly informed and accessible to all. As the director of its online membership platform, which currently hosts over 12,000 enrollments, Dr. Berry is committed to inspiring a culture of justice and true belonging for all through her agency's tagline, "Many Hues, One Humanity." With her extensive experience as a former college professor, Dr. Berry designed Brownicity's flagship course and study guide, What Lies Between Us, fostering first steps towards racial healing, and authored Hues of You, an activity book for learning about the skin you are in. Dr. Berry is also a curriculum specialist for the Community School of Davidson in North Carolina, just north of Charlotte, a contributor for Encourage Me, and a TED and Q Ideas speaker. Dr. Berry earned her PhD in Curriculum and Instruction and MA in English from Iowa State University, my mother's alma mater, so that's great. And her BA from South Carolina State University. Dr. Berry and her husband Nathan have 3 daughters and 2 Aussie doodles. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lucretia Carter-Berry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, Pastor Andrew. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. Winston-Salem, I am home. How about that? And it's good to see your beautiful faces. Some of the faces I recognize, and some faces are new, and some of you, maybe you've changed so much that I can't hardly recognize you. But thank you so much for coming out tonight. I am so grateful to be here to launch the book study that the staff for Salem Montessori School is going to do. And so this event is a part of launching that book study. So thank you for coming to be a part of education in this way. So like he said, I am Lucretia Carter-Berry, and I was born and raised right here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm so excited to be a product of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, born and raised right on the south side. Graduated from, can anybody guess? Parkland High School, go Mustangs. I graduated from Parkland High School a long time ago. long time ago. And then I went off to college. I went to an HBCU, the HBCU that has the best band in the land, South Carolina State University, go Bulldogs. And so I got my undergraduate degree there. And I like to say that God has a sense of humor, because then I went from a historically black university to Iowa State University, where they actually make the white people. That's where all the white people are from, Iowa. Yes, they are. So that's where I met my husband, Nate, which probability states he's a white guy. So that's relevant to the story. So met Nathan, and then we got married, and we have 3 multi-ethnic daughters. They are now 15, 12, and 11. I can't believe it. And we had all planned to come here tonight, but then they all have lives. So Nate had to stay with them and take them to cheerleader meeting, basketball, and dance. So let's just keep Nate in prayer as he is solo parenting tonight. So, but before we moved to the Charlotte area, we did live here, and all 3 of our daughters attended, in some kind of way, Salem Montessori School. And so I have a special place in my heart for Salem Montessori School for several reasons. I'm going to talk about two. When we lived here, my husband and I, we moved to Winston-Salem to plant a church. So any church planters in the house, I don't know if you can relate to this, but when you are a church planter, you are under the poverty line. You are so far under the poverty line, you're like looking up, like you have no money at all. But that's okay, because we were always taken care of, never lacked anything. And so that's actually how I was introduced to Salem Montessori School, because my then 4-year-old was saying, I want to go to preschool. I forgot to say that at Iowa State, I earned a doctorate in education. So I come to the education journey and putting my children in schools from that perspective, having studied, learning theory and educational philosophy and psychology and all of those things, and how people learn, how children learn, how adults learn, what model schools look like. So I knew what kind of school and what kind of schools that I wanted my children to attend, what was valuable to a person so immersed in education as I was. So someone said, so I wasn't just looking for any preschool for my 4-year-old who wanted to attend school, because she was like, all my cousins are going to preschool. How come I'm not going to school? So I'm looking for a school, and someone said, you should try Salem Montessori because they have scholarships. And so for people who of low income, as we were, Salem Montessori provided scholarships. And so my 4-year-old was able to attend Salem Montessori School, but I won't even say the amount, because I don't even know if they still do that, but yes, thank you very much for that. You do, yay, thank you, yes. So I just have, a debt of gratitude for the experience. Okay, so then it gets better. So we were attending Salem Montessori School, and our 4-year-old comes home one day, and she says, Mommy, today we did an activity in our class, and I learned that we are all shades of brown. And she said, Daddy is light brown. She says, Mommy, you are dark brown, and I am medium brown. I thought, that's genius. That's exactly right. And as a multi-ethnic family, we had never shied away from conversations regarding what we look like. We knew that our biracial or multi-ethnic children would have to have the tools and the fortitude to be able to navigate our very hyper-racialized United States of America. So we never pretended that, we live in a world where in a post-racial society, or we live in a world where everything is great now. Like, we knew that they would get those questions. Like, are you white? Are you black? Like, what are you? Who do you play with? We knew people would try to put them in boxes. And so we wanted them to have language. We wanted them to be informed, and we wanted them to be confident. And we had been looking for a framework that allowed us to talk about the many hues that we are, but also we are one family. Like, we're not just these two racial categories forged together. Like, our children aren't like paint mixed together. They have a mom and a dad, like every human being. And it was important that they knew that they knew that they were fine. And the problem was with how our society imposes racial categories on our phenotype. Okay, so how do you explain that to a 4-year-old? So when she came home and said, we're all hues of brown, I'm like, that's it. And again, because we were versed in this, I remember sitting around our table. We live right up there on Green Street. I remember sitting around the table saying, yes, and let me explain about melanin. And melanin is brown. And so Daddy is light brown because his ancestors lived somewhere where there was less sunshine and less heat. So they needed less melanin in order to survive and live. And she's eating her food like, yeah, okay, this is way more information than I asked for, but okay. And I said, and so mommy is darker brown because her ancestors lived in a place that had a lot more sunshine and heat, so they needed more melanin to protect themselves from the sun. And so, okay. And then you have medium melanin, yes, because you are a product of all of these ancestors. And she's like, okay, but that became the framework for how we talked about our different phenotypes and how we talked about race. And it worked. Pretty soon, like at that time, we lived around lots of families that were multi-ethnic, either by marriage and birth like ours, or by adoption. And they were like, now how are y'all talking about this? How are you explaining this? And so we say, let me tell you about the hues of brown. So we tell them about this, and people, oh, we love that. That sounds so positive. And children can get that. So that caught on. And all those years ago, someone said, you should start a blog. And I said, well, what's a blog? I don't even know what that is. You should write, you should do something. And I remember thinking, nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody's interested in that. Okay, but I was wrong. And so as years went on, more and more families were asking these questions and wanted to have these conversations. But mind you, we have been taught as a society to be what? Colorblind, right? And colorblindness robs us of a framework and language to just simply talk about what we look like, right? And to talk about why we look this way. And of course, we know that colorblindness, of course, masks any kind of public discourse that you need to have around race and racism, right? So it really silences us and robs us of all kind of autonomy and power. But what I kept finding was I kept being invited into spaces because parents wanted to have these conversations. And I would be invited into schools. Can you come and facilitate a conversation? And I'm thinking, sure, nobody's gonna come. So I would prepare for like 2 parents to come. And no, it'd be like 200 parents would come because parents needed a space to be validated, to get language, to get words, to equip their children. They didn't want to be colorblind, and they didn't want to be color silenced. And so then Brownicity, the organization we created, came out of that. So brown, of course, represents what? Melanin. And then icity comes from the word ethnicity. And ethnicity means that which we have in common. So brownicity is a mashup of those 2 words. It's an example of how we get to be creative. We can create what we know is possible. And so our tagline is, we are many hues, but one humanity. So we hold space to talk about our oneness, but also, how we look different, how we are diverse, and then also, how superficial values and disenfranchisement has been imposed on us through a system and the institution of, hello there, I'm like recognizing faces, the institution of race. Okay, so Brownicity, yes, our mission is to foster education designed to create a culture of true belonging and justice and to make it accessible. Because what I kept finding was that if you wanted that kind of education, if you wanted education that helped you grow your critical thinking and gave you language, you had to take a college course. Now, how many parents have the time to do that? So we began to create learning experiences that, for example, you had childcare. So when I be invited into spaces, I said, okay, now what's your plan for childcare? Because we want parents to be able to come and not worry about children. And then we would have something for the children as well, because we want children to be gaining literacy around phenotype and race and culture and ethnicity at the same time that the parents are. Okay, so now our impact is that in 2015, people were loving this so much, they said, okay, enough of these kind of side conversations. We want you to teach us. And so right after the Charleston massacre happened, a few people came to me from my church. They said, okay, we're putting something on the calendar. So by this date, we need you to teach us. So that's when and how I developed What Lies Between Us, which is this course. It's called Fostering First Steps Toward Racial Healing, because what we understood was that people just needed a fundamental understanding of why we're still at this point, why in 2015 are we still struggling with race? And that's because, we are woefully undereducated about it, and we have a superficial understanding of this construct and how it was created and how it has manifested and how we continue to perpetuate it because we don't understand it as a mechanism. So no problem. I sat down and with my doctorate in curriculum and instruction and my experience as a Black woman and a mom in a multi-ethnic family, I can do this, and I can do it from a perspective that is life-giving and full of healing and hope. So that we did What Lies Between Us, and we've been invited to teach this course in churches. We, when was the COVID quarantine? 2020. So we did a live broadcast and had over 2,300 enrollments. So that was groups of people enrolled as we taught this class. We broadcast this class over the course of 5 weeks. People are still coming to learn. People want to understand, because when you have understanding, then you are empowered to be a part of change. When you don't have understanding, then you just kind of go with whoever sounds the best, or you sit on the sidelines. But people want to understand. Okay, and then after that, I was invited into a school. So I began working in schools, and then I created a course. It's the same as What Lies Between Us, but it's called Foundations. Because What Lies Between Us, because people in church were asking me to design this, it has Bible references in it. And so for school, same education, but it's called Foundations course, and it's all online. And then the school said, well, can you design a course for high schoolers? Yep. Sure can. So I teach a high school course called Anti-Racism 101. It used to be called What is Racism? And the kids signed up for it because I thought I knew what it was. But since you named the course, What is Racism? I thought maybe I don't know what it is. So it is a high school elective. And again, I'm offering the same onboarding, foundational understanding. We just get to do it for a whole school year. And so I get to stand in front of my high school students and tell them, you all know more than most adults know on this topic. Your understanding is far more sophisticated. So I do have to teach them, I have to teach them how to talk to their elders. Because teenagers and teenage angst, they're excited to know more than the adults. Okay, so also since then, the Presbytery of Charlotte has named What Lies Between Us its official recommended anti-racism education. How about that? And then we also offer a certificate program if you want to learn how to teach it. Because I can't be everywhere all the time, but you are in your communities. You already have trust with your parishioners and peers and colleagues. And so, yes, we have a certificate program where we teach people, I train people, we develop people how to be teachers of this curriculum meant for onboarding. Because, a lot of people think that when you sit down to learn about race or talk about race, it's supposed to be brutal and painful and guilt-ridden and hard, and you're supposed to cry. And then when you cry, you get called fragile, see? Some of y'all are like, oh, see, I know. So that's why I wrote What Lies Between Us, and that's why I train people how to care for people as you onboard them into this understanding, all right? Okay, and so we continue to create courses. We offer over 20 courses for beginners and advanced, and thousands, and I mean thousands, even people in Canada, people all over the world have benefited from our courses and workshops, keynotes and things like that. And we have 3 ways to engage, right? So we call it launch, learn, and lead. So let's just say you want to just try some things out. Well, you can buy a book Actually, all my books are on sale in this room over here. For the low, low price of, I will autograph your book. So when we're done, you can go buy a book. But no, you can do something like that, or you can watch a TED Talk, things like that. If you want to learn, we have a membership where you then jump in and you plant yourself on a growth journey, and you can be a part of all the courses that we have there. And then we have LEAD, and LEAD is for organizations and leaders who really want to invest in more of like a year-long process. So again, making this education and this development accessible to the public. And then in 2022, I wrote this book in 2018, but that's just how long the publication process takes. No, I was in 2020, a publisher asked for it. And so this book is then based off of that very first Salem Montessori School conversation. And it's called Hues of You, an activity book for learning about the skin you're in. But it's so much more about skin than about skin. It's doing the opposite of color blindness. So it's giving children and their adults language, understanding, and a capacity to be able to talk intelligently. Like the kids don't have to go to school and say harmful things to their peers because they don't know. Because they've been in home coloring and asking questions and reading, you see, so then they don't have to, and I think that's something that we don't consider. Like, kids have the questions, whether you have the conversation or not, they have these questions, and then if you don't talk about it at home or in the classroom, then yeah, they're gonna talk about it to their peers. How are you? They're gonna talk about it to their peers, and sometimes it comes out in harmful ways. And then when I do these activities with kids in schools, some of the most beautiful conversations surface. It's as if they're saying, finally, thank you, whoever this lady is, thank you for giving us words and saying that it's okay to have this conversation. So one of my favorite stories, I was reading to fourth graders, and I talked about melanin and why people have, that very same conversation from Salem Montessori School. I had that conversation and talked about that. He goes, in fourth grade, he came up to me, he said, excuse me, do people who have more melanin like you, can they jump higher than people with less melanin? I was so confused. See, y'all got it already. I can tell y'all got it. I was so confused because I was like, I did not talk about jumping at all today. What is he talking about? And he saw that I was confused. So he said, because Michael Jordan has the same melanin as you. I'm like, oh. And he said he can jump really high. I'm like, okay, buddy. So here's the thing. I'm the wrong person to ask about sports. But I did know this one thing about Michael Jordan. I do know that Michael Jordan practiced a ton. Like, he practiced so much. So I was able to tell the child, I said, look, I have the same amount of melanin as Michael Jordan. I cannot jump very high. I said, Michael Jordan can jump that high because he practiced a long time and a lot. So if you want to be able to jump that high, then you just practice a long time. And so there are several, I don't have time. Ooh, no, I don't. I don't have time to teach the whole lesson on all the narratives that broke down in his brain. Like all the misinformation, all the pathways of wrong information that were forming in his brain. But that was just a few seconds, right? That was a little workshop, and then he had space to ask that question, and it corrected all kinds of things in his brain. Okay, let me keep on going. Okay, so finally, I get to Teaching for Justice and Belonging, which just came out in August of 2022. So why did me and Dr. Tia Starker-Glass write this book? Dr. Tia Starker-Glass is a great friend of mine. She is a professor of education at UNC Charlotte, and she is a Brownicity advisor. She also helped design one of our kids' courses that you can purchase. And so we wrote this book because we kept being invited to, I want to say, to very advanced level work, but people didn't understand that you need a foundation first. So people wanted to jump into the deep of DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice. Some people call it JEDI, some people call it Debbie, what. So people wanted to jump into the deep and had no foundation. And so we'd say, okay, well, you need to do, just for example, you need to do these 5 steps. And they say, well, we just want step number 5. And I'm like, well, I could take your money, except for I'm not that kind of person. You really do need 1 through 4 before you get 5. No, we just want 5. So, okay, let me figure out. So Dr. Glass and I, let's figure out how we can somehow squeeze in 1 through 4 before we give them 5. And so we tell one of these stories in the book. And I remember, we worked so hard to figure out how, for this one particular school, how to do this. And then the leader came up and said, he pretty much said, yeah, thank you, number 5. That was all we wanted. That's all we wanted was number 5. And so I was devastated because I had worked on 1 through 4. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was devastated because I felt so bad for the staff, but I also felt so bad for the students. And so again, like I said, we share about that in the book because that is not the way to do it. And then we've watched that school struggle over and over again because they didn't have 1 through 4. Now in their minds, because they were just recently on the news because there was a video that went viral. And so, they put out this statement, we've been working on diversity, equity, inclusion for however many years, and I'm telling you so many times, I was teaching at a church, and we wrapped up, and a parent who was at the church and was taking the class, she comes up to us, will you come to my school? Do you work in schools? I heard you work in school. Will you come to my school? Do you go to other schools? I sure do. I said, what's the name of your school? And she said the name of her school. I burst out laughing. I couldn't control myself. I was like, and she was like, oh, so you've heard of us? Yes, I have. I have heard of you. And I felt so bad for her because she was like, will you help us? And I said, I will just tell you this because, I can't tell all the business. I can't spill all the tea. But I said, I will tell you this. I said, several parents have gone to them and asked for our help, and they have told those parents that they already worked with us. And I said, and then when they did work with us and we tried to follow up, on, okay, let's keep going, we didn't hear anything from them. I said, so I'm just letting you know, if you go to them, so you won't get your feelings hurt. But anyway, that just sidebar, parents, we can organize amongst ourselves if we need to. So I just said you might want to organize something for parents because the school's not going to do that. Okay, sorry, that was a total side tangent. So back to why we wrote this book. Yeah, because people want to jump into the deep without any foundation. And so just think about it. 1954, the Supreme Court said that segregating public schools was unconstitutional. That's 1954. Who was alive in 1954? Some of you were alive in 1954. That's right. 1964, Congress passed Public Law A8352, also known as the Civil Rights Act. That's right, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Okay, but what did not happen? Okay, we'd been soaking in segregation for centuries, right? And so then when these policies went in place, nobody taught us how to undo that, right? And so now what is happening is their teachers and parents are tasked with doing that. Here, you get to do the hard work. And a lot of teachers and parents didn't know that we still had a race problem until 2020. Oh, y'all can relate. Yes, I heard that so many times. And then when the George Floyd, and I was like, that was when you saw that? Oh, but okay, hey, everybody has a journey. Or, in a lot of, we didn't know we had a race problem until, and it was 2019, 2018. Okay, so how can people then take on this work? How can people jump into the deep? People are expected to write these robust like, I'm like, she's out here nodding. Like, you can hear me? Okay. People are out here writing robust DEI statements and posting them on their website. And I'm like, how you going to do that? How? Because we are a people that has been immersed. We have been immersed in segregation, right? So how do we then create the world that we know is possible? Like, you can't go from 1 to whatever, 100. You can't even go from 1 to 5. You need some 0 first, then 1, 2, 3, 4. So, yes, this work is complex, multifaceted, and complicated. And yes, we are undereducated about it. And we're also, many of us also are of the color blindness. So if you grew up being told that you are not supposed to talk about race or see color, then how are you supposed to now, all of a sudden, be very like competent and about it, and be so and have so much skill that you can then reorganize and reimagine and rewire your brain and your schools and your homes. It's quite an undertaking. Okay, and then most of us grew up learning about one aspect of history, right? A European aspect of history, colonizers, conquest, and contributions of Europeans. Most of us don't even know like a holistic vision of history. And then when we are prompted to talk about race, it might be because something happened to someone, or we saw something happening on the news, which then makes us think racism is a thing that happened to George Floyd that one time, right? Or racism is a thing that happened when that guy, and I won't say his name, went into a church in Charleston and murdered the parishioners during their Bible study. So, but that's again a superficial understanding of racism. And then, of course, we have my favorite way for us to be informed about race and racism and all kinds of injustices, social injustices, is through the politicians. Now, when did we allow politicians to be our teachers? They are not educating us. They are trying to get our what? That's right, votes. Y'all read the book. Okay, so then, and then I saw in 2020 so many DEI programs pop up, and I'm like, oh dear. So now we're being programmed. See? Now we're being programmed. And so people are grabbing DEI programs for a quick fix, and a check the box. There's so many people invited me, can you come do this? Can you come do this? And then what else are you going to do? Well, that's it. We will check the box. No, I will not. Even the school that I am now, I initially said, no, I'm not coming there because you just want to check the box. And then I went and met the director and found out, no, she was not trying to check a box. She was like, let's start with a 5-year plan. Who are you? And yes, ma'am. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's why I'm there, getting paid peanuts. Anyway, so then, and so then we say, well, let's have a guest speaker. And so we think that the guest speaker is supposed to fix all the stuff in 45 minutes. Nope. We want to have a group discussion, and churches are so good at this, and by good I mean bad. Like they're like, let's take our white church, and then let's get together with our black church, or our Asian church, or our Mexican church, and let's talk about race. What? So you bring strangers together with a superficial understanding, and you say, let's talk to one another. And most of the people leave traumatized, but they're not going to tell you that they was traumatized, because if they tell you was traumatized, you're going to say, you're fragile. Isn't that right? No. So, and then people want to debate. Nope, debates are about who is the loudest or who is right. It's not about who's right. People want to have a discussion. A discussion is about who talks the most. So usually the person who is talking the most, like right now, I'm talking the most, this is not a discussion, right? See, it is not, right? When we really should be working towards dialogue. Dialogue allows us to build off of a commonality. And then all of that with no trust. And so, for example, if you didn't trust me, I could tell you all do. You're all looking at me and nodding and smiling, you see. But like, how can you grow together if you don't trust each other? And so you can't do that. You can't do that with a 45-minute talk or with a guest speaker, right? That is development over an extended amount of time. Okay, and then recently the research is out that DEI programs don't work. So I consider that good news and bad news. Bad news because, dang, people have invested a lot of money into these things. I had a person call me and say, Lucretia, I attended a DEI, whatever, blah, 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 event. She said, these people paid this company $20,000 for 2 days to make people mad, for people to go home mad and broken. And she said, I told them to call you. I don't know why they didn't call you. Well, because I would not have let them pay me $20,000 for 2 days to let people go home mad. My biggest struggle, Amy will attest to this, I'm like, you need to work for at least this amount of time. And people are like, well, we only have 1 day. Y'all, we have to invest more than 1 day. Okay, how much time I got? Oh, I'm doing good. All right. So why DEI programs are failing? Because many programs are based on a one-size-fits-all approach. Organizations are different. Schools are different. From classroom to classroom is even different, right? From church to church is different. When we work with churches, we have to learn more about their culture, their context, their demographic. What specifically is your issue? Like, yeah, you can't just do a one-size-fits-all. Many DEI programs are like an add-on or an afterthought. I had a person come to me, she was starting a business, She said, I'm starting my business. And she said, and so I want you to work with me so that this is at the root of the business. Ma'am, she said, I don't want to grow and have like 10 employees and then we decide to consider diversity and inclusion. And I'm like, okay, yes, more of you in all of the places and spaces, because it's not, it can't be an add-on. And remember, again, our nation, our roots, most of our roots and the trunk and some of the branches are just steeped in the racial status quo that it was built on. And that's not anything to be like, that's not anything to be like upset about. Like, we can't go back and change the past. But what we can't do is then take this tree with these roots and then say, let's just staple some diversity and equity and inclusion and multi-ethnicity fruit on it. We can't do that. So we have to do some uprooting. We have to till some soil. We have to plant the seeds that we want to grow and cultivate. We have to plant the seeds of fruit that we want to harvest, that we want to manifest and cultivate. See, this is why on the cover of the book, see how it has a seed and then grow. See what we're doing there? Okay. Also, and I already mentioned this, people don't want to invest resources and support. It's like, well, we have, I figure people are always trying to figure out ways, not to invest or not to pay me. And, sometimes I'm like for example, like a church, this happened. Like I had to pay $99 to attend your marriage conference, which I'm going to be honest was garbage. It's going to be honest. I'm just kidding, it was. But you won't even pay. But you don't even want people to pay $99 for a course that is going to be pivotal in equipping them to be change makers in your organization. You see, the flip side of that is we worked with a church early on. Now y'all know how important Easter is to churches. They took their whole Easter budget and put it towards doing this study. I was like, now y'all are for real serious. And it was rough, being honest. But I'm like, see, you put your money where it should be, is what I'm gonna say. But we don't wanna invest. So That's another reason why the DEI stuff doesn't work. And then, yeah, sometimes we just think that it's about adding representation. So, like, okay, if we've been traditionally white, and then we just sprinkle in, let's bring in a black person and a Latino or Latina or an Asian person, we're good. But again, it's not about, adding people to this table. Like, so if this table was built for one particular culture, one particular mindset, one particular way of being, and then you just invite other people, people from a different culture, a different mindset, a different way of being, that really doesn't change the table, you see. So we gotta let's build a table that welcomes everyone, or that everybody gets to build from the beginning. And then finally, we don't allow enough time. So sometimes it's like I said, people want to give it one day and be like, we should be good now. We did that one thing that time with Dr. Berry, we're good. Or people want to give it 1 year. And like I said, I like when the school director said, let's start with a 5-year plan. I'm telling you, I started crying. That was the first time I met her. I'm sitting in her office crying. I ain't never heard of such a thing. Because it takes time. Think about all the beautiful trees that we have around here, and think about how long it took for them to grow, how long it took for them to bear fruit. I think in the book we even talk about the bamboo plant. And what does it take? I probably should have read it before I tried to talk about it, because I don't remember, but I'm thinking, the bamboo plant shows nothing for the first 6 years. So you plant it, and it's like, well, dang. Is it dead? Did it not? What's happening? Nothing. Maybe I should dig it back up, walk away. Nothing happening. And then I want to say it's in that 6th year. Again, if you buy the book, the story's in the book, so you can you can take it. It grows 80 feet, some ridiculous amount. Because for those first 6 years, it's underground, getting stronger, getting the nutrients, getting everything that it needs so that it could shoot up when it's time. Wait, shoot up, that's the wrong terminology. Grow fast, there we go. So, like I said, we use the seed growth metaphor for teaching for justice and belonging. Because we want people to, even if you don't read the book, we want you to look at the book and say, oh, this is about a process. This is about a process. This is about a process that takes intention. This is about a process that takes time, right? This is about something that is holistic and strategic, that requires divine intelligence. From the soil has divine intelligence, the seed has divine intelligence, has direction. We get to the rain, water, nurture, sunshine. It's a process. Support is required. And then we also talk about realistic expectations. So if you look at your handout shows the name of the chapters. And so we have soil is where you seek to understand how standard policies and practices influence and impact your learning environment. So in this chapter, you're given information about that, and then you're prompted to do that. Seed, prepare yourself for long-term growth by engaging in self-assessment and inner work. So Dr. Glass and I were like, so maybe when they call us up and they want a one-day thing or a 1-hour thing, we'll say, why don't you just read the book and then get back to us? It says, roots. This is where you begin to build your racial competency and understanding. Because if you're not rooted, as soon as winds of adversity come, then you're off. As soon as the politicians start coming at you, saying the things they need to say, mongering the fear they need you to fear in order to get you to vote for them, if you don't have any roots, you'll go right along with it. Sprout, you want to acknowledge and appreciate small beginnings and early growth in both your personal life and sphere of influence. And we put this here because a lot of times people go, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And then you don't take the time to celebrate what has been accomplished, the growth that has taken place. If you're always looking towards there, it's going to feel like you're never going to get there. You'll be exhausted. And so along this journey, you have to take the time to celebrate small things. And some people out there in anti-racism or social justice world will, say, no, that's not good enough. I disagree with that. In life, like when your child, you don't wait till your child is running, right, to celebrate. When they stand up, you're like, yay! They take one step, yay! They take another step, yay! Like we applaud every little thing, right? Exactly. We lavish love and appreciation on the growth. And you have to do the same thing on this growth journey as well. You have to engage in joy. Because if you don't, it'll feel like daunting, heavy work all of the time. I think in the book I mentioned how Martin Luther King was talking in, I kind of want to say 57, 56, 7, and he's talking to this crowd, and he was saying, but we're just a bud. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that must have felt excruciating. Because they had made so much progress and they'd done so much work. And then you have all of these acts that have been passed. And he goes, but we're but a bud. But then he went on to help them acknowledge and appreciate and celebrate and honor being the bud. So we have to acknowledge that. So next is the bud. So create and share the vision with others, set a collective precedent, and establish direction. So some people think that, I'm starting this work here with the soil. No, you're actually starting with the bud. This is all the pre-work up here. A lot of people want to jump in right here. Something happens, and they hear it on the news. Now what do I do? Well, let's start with the soil. Okay, now weed. Oh, you got to do some weeding. This was a fun chapter to write, y'all. Because I'm all about telling people what they can do. This is what you can do. This is what you get to do. You can do this. And then here we had to write what you couldn't do. And that was a little fun, too. You can't do this. Stop that. Don't do this. Don't do that. This is painful. This was hurtful. Don't do this. Okay, so you have to uproot beliefs, practices, and policies that work against cultivating the justice and belonging we all deserve. And then bloom. So at the bloom stage, you say, what do I do next? As you continue to build on what you have cultivated, and then you repeat. So we wrote this book to give people real life examples and cases for what cultivating justice and belonging in our homes and in our classrooms and our schools would look like. We want people to have realistic expectations and hope. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Now we have time for some Q&A. And so I want to give you some guidelines for Q&A. I'm typically not a fan of Q&A because a lot of times when people come to talk about race and it's Q&A time, they say crazy stuff. They say things that are not okay. All right, and I am a teacher and I don't play that. And it's my responsibility to hold this space and to make sure that this space is psychologically safe for everyone to learn. Okay, I have been known in my adult classes to tell the adult to be quiet and that you can only participate by listening. Because listening is participation too, isn't it? Yes, it is. Okay, so here are my guidelines so that we keep this a psychologically safe space. I don't want anybody to go home traumatized. I don't want anybody to go home feeling sorry that they came here. Okay, so if you ask a question, it must be a genuine question. Don't be a statement Posed as a question, okay? And it has to be focused on the topic, cultivating justice and belonging. It can't be, we are not talking about DeSantis and them, okay? We're not doing that. I'm not here for that. I do not have, that's not my energy, my space, my flow. I don't give myself to that, okay? So stay on topic, cultivating justice and belonging in our classrooms and homes, and it must be a genuine question. No trauma or drama. So even if you think, gosh, this might traumatize someone, you can come and ask me, like in my ear, and then I will rephrase it so that it is safe for people to hear, okay? So that's number 2. And then we want you to take less than a minute, okay, because again, people are like, let me tell you my whole life story, which I would love to hear, but this isn't the place for that. So let's honor our space, and let's honor each other, and let's go home more whole, a little more whole than we came. So how should we do the Q&A? How should we do that? Where did you have, Catherine, did you have a particular way? Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so if you have a question, come up to the lectern. How about that? Be on the spot. And ask your question if you have a question. And you don't have to have a question. Y'all can just go buy books, and then we go home. Yes, you have to come to the lectern. And tell us your name. Yeah, so we can hear.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm not mine.
Oh, and one more thing, I forgot to say that for this book, my niece did the illustrations, and her parents are here, and her grandparents are here. Can y'all raise your hands, parents and grandparents of the niece? She's at UNC Greensboro right now, but when she did these illustrations, she was in high school. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Amanda. And I know many people in the room. My children are at Salem Montessori. I have a question about, I know that you said that where we're starting would be like in the bud, but this is all like the pre-work, obviously. But you mentioned with like Sprout, does acknowledging and appreciating the small beginnings and early growth in your personal life and spheres of influence. When you work with organizations, schools, and other organizations, can you give some examples of what those acknowledgments and those like small things that they would see and how they would recognize them, knowing that like they might feel small and you might go, but it's not really small. Can you give examples of what that might look like for us to recognize and appreciate?
Yeah, that's so good. Well, so one thing I did was, I stayed in the kind of research gathering mode. And so, I sent out, all staff like, hey, how have things changed for you, gotten better, whatever? Like, what has happened as a result of this work we've been doing? So that prompted people to think.
Sure.
And then all kinds of little things came in, like, well, now my children have these very sophisticated conversations about their phenotype.
In
Or
school?
Now, in school, or now, as a teacher, I used to be so afraid when the children would start talking about race, but now, I'm not afraid and I let them share and then we teach. So these little stories trickled in, and then I put them in a presentation and presented it. Like you can present it to your teacher group I did it like at a conference. I think for parents, you can keep a little journal, prompt. So I think it has to be prompted, because
Sure.
Otherwise, it's just like a little bump and people keep going.
Well, I think that we all, I can appreciate when you say like people are like, well, give me number 5, right? And so it's like, but you have to recognize where you come from and to see those things. And I was just curious as to like the things that we probably just are happening, but we're not aware of as much, just to be aware of it so that you can see that there's change being made.
Right, so conversate, like if, for every time I have, like read with kids and have these workshops, immediately I see a result. Like, okay, kids have language, kids have understanding. What goes away, kids don't hurt each other with comments anymore. The classroom is much more relaxed, much more joyful. There's less incidents regarding like fighting or over like differences like your hair or how you look, things like that. I think And even something that isn't, that again you have to pay attention to is, like, adults have to pay attention to how more comfortable they are along the way. Like, they don't have fear, they're not, they don't have the trepidation.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Anybody else? Yes.
I just wanted to talk up here. No, I'm just kidding.
What's your name?
My name is Emily Duncan.
Hi, Emily Duncan.
Hi. Thank you for being here. My question comes from the parent perspective of especially those preschool and early elementary kids. When they come home from school, and in our home, we're on this journey, and the kids come home and say, well, my teacher taught me about the lovely Thanksgiving meal that was had and how the Native Americans were invited to sit down and break bread, or any other topic. If we're talking about settlers versus colonizers or whatnot, what is the approach to speak to your child so that you're not necessarily discrediting their teacher and that, teacher figure or whoever, but you're also saying, well, they're wrong, or, but you can't say it like that, right? You can't say their teacher's wrong, but how do you reframe that so that they don't go back to school and say, well, my mom said you're wrong?
Right.
Right.
I'm not against that, actually. But, honestly,
I would probably say that.
But I mean, I think you don't, because you don't have to say, well, your teacher's wrong. You can just share the truer perspective. Well, this is what actually happened. I mean, you can say that. Our children don't need us. Like, the whole, word being concerned about the teacher being called out is wrong. Like, that's our thing. Like, children don't, that's not a child's problem. They are like, oh, well, my teacher told it this way, but I learned it this way at home. I mean, I feel like, here's a larger example, like growing up, I go to school and hear history one way, and then I come home and hear it a different way. And it's not that my parents said, nope, that's not true. Sometimes they said that was wrong. See, I'm like, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. I think that helps them with critical thinking, and it doesn't make it about the teacher. You don't have to make it about the teacher. You get to make it about that particular telling of history or that particular story. Because like I said, I remember coming home saying, "Hey, my teacher said, hey, some of these stories are in the book," and then I'm like, and my mom was like, "Yeah, no, and then and then it expanded my understanding. So as a kid, I remember going, okay, I could see why my teacher would explain it this way, but I understand it this way as well.
Thank you.
Kids can understand the sophisticated. They can do the higher order thinking. I know your kids anyway. Anybody else? Man, is it the guidelines? I did the guidelines, and so people don't have anything to say. Is that what happened? We good? Amy? Okay. Sure. She's asking for a couple of more stories of engaging with kids. When I was doing, sometimes I get it, most of the time I get invited into a classroom because it's just good to give kids this language. But sometimes I get invited because something has happened, unfortunately. And so then I have to pretend like I'm just the guest reader who happens to be talking about, where are y'all going? I am not letting y'all sleep. You got to pick up children. Bye. Yep. That's my sister-in-law and aunt. I'm surprised they were here because, just like us, you have the children in all the places. And then where y'all going? Well, thank you. And that's my brother and my niece. Thank you. So yeah, so I was called into a classroom because there was, I think this was like there was a group of white students who were ostracizing kids of color because of skin color. So I go in to take my books and read, and I have to pretend like I don't, I'm just here reading. And so I opened the book to talk about how we're all hues of brown. Like, did you know? And then I'll start, did you know that we are all hues of brown? And the little white girl, who was the reason I was called into the classroom, she goes, I'm not brown. You're brown. She's brown. I'm white. And then she had like a little amen corner. Yeah, we're white. And I was like, well, okay. And the teachers, you should have seen the teachers. They were, I'm just gonna call her Susie. Susie. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, it's a little girl. What was that? Second grade, first grade, second grade, whatever. I said, it's okay. And I said, let me read my book and we'll see how. And so, I start flipping pages and reading my book, and she was still like, I'm white. But by the time I got finished reading my 2 books, and, one of the books is about, and it explained about melanin and our ancestors and the sun. And then we read a book about, we're going to name all of our skin tones, and, the skin tone names have to be a reflection of, nature and food and all the beautiful things. And so the characters are being, they're naming their skin tones, all these beautiful tones. So I'm saying, okay, now we're going to draw our portraits, and we're going to color our portraits, and we're going to give our skin tones a beautiful name. And it can't be white or black, because those aren't skin tone names. And so I said, would anybody like to share their skin tone name? Her hand shot up. I was scared. Because I said, if this little girl say white, I don't know what I'm going to do. She said, I am brown sugar. And it was so convincing that I was trying to figure out, is there a brown sugar that's that color? Like, I was so, like, do they make brown sugar that light? Like, maybe I haven't seen it, but no, she was convinced. I am brown sugar. I said, well, okay. And then, they have to try to write it. And of course, they're creatively right, spelling. And so I thought, well, maybe when she has to write it, she's going to change it, when she has to write it down. And then she was like, how do you spell brown sugar? B-R-O. I was like, okay. But anyway, but the point of that was to help her, was to help all of the students see, okay, like, we're one humanity, we're one classroom. And yes, at this point, research shows by the time they're going to school, they have already learned our racial category in society. They've already learned the story of race, whether you've talked to them about it or not. If they've been watching TV, they've just been looking around and seeing how the world worked. And so in her mind, yes, she was quote unquote white. She is at the top of the hierarchy, and then the other kids, or the kids of color, were below her. And so, but just with reading 2 books and letting them have a conversation, we got her straightened. Well, so I thought. Well, we got her straightened out that way. Then the next year, I was called back. I was called to her other class. They invited me to class. Well, we had an incident with hair touching. And so then when I was told about it, and then they said that, and I was like, it's the same little girl. But it just shows how, we need to have these conversations. Kids are curious, and just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that those questions go away. And they don't, and she didn't know how to behave around differences. And so that's why we have to normalize differences. So it's not all about hair pulling. And so yeah, she had actually slapped a little girl because the black girl said, no, you can't touch my hair. Yeah. And that could have been a horrible mess. But anyway, they took care of all of the, the things that administrators and teachers were supposed to take care of. And then I came in again as just a guest speaker. I'm just gonna read my little books. And yeah, and I knew that they had already had the one about melanin, so then we had to do one about hair. And then I had to talk about hair touching. And this was so hilarious. Kids are so bright, because even though I'm just like this random reader for the day, I could tell that the little black girl who had been smacked, she knew I was there for her. So she's looking at me the whole time, nodding, like, yeah, I see what you're doing. And I had to come up with this. I said, well, now, why? I said, now we can look at hair and we can admire hair, but we don't have to touch it. We can look with our eyes and we can admire with our eyes. We don't have to touch it. And then she spoke up. She said, yeah, like at a museum. I thought, that was perfect, because they can relate to that. See, kids, they have the answers. They do. So that was kind of what we led with. Like, yes, like at a museum, you can admire it, you can say it's beautiful, but do not touch with your hands. And then that one, the hair thing is a little different, because then I have to teach adults why culturally that is not okay. Because adults will be like, well, you can touch my hair. Yep, but this is a different culture, and hair touching, there's some, limits around that. So, and we respect people's culture, we respect people's, their, whatever, we respect them and their choice. All right, was that good for some stories? Okay, well, all righty. I won't keep y'all. I am going to, once again, thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna go into this room over here. If you want to come buy a book, I'm happy to sign your book. And if you don't want to buy a book, that's okay too. You can just come talk to me. So thank you so much. One thing that we say at the end of every Brownicity session, we call it our benediction and our inspiration. And if I had a screen, I would project it, but I will recite it for you. And if you know it, please say it with me. May we be people of peace with voices of hope, doing the hard work of love. Thank you all so much.
All right. I want to thank Andrew and Ginny and Home Moravian Church for hosting this conversation. Would love to thank you guys for being here and being a part of this. And thank you, Dr. Berry, for holding this space for us and encouraging us to have this meaningful dialogue. Please do check out the literature that's available to us, and I hope you guys have a great evening.